to start off by saying thank you all for coming. I think this is just a great opportunity. I'm actually really new to Ashland. My name is Hope. My last name is Becker. And it's just been absolutely amazing being a part of Ashland and everything that the town provides to the community members, and I'm glad to be a part of it. Tonight, we have a couple of speakers, but before we do that, I also wanted to thank our videographer, Tom Wolf. He's going to be recording tonight. And then it's our hope and anticipation that if you decide that you have gleaned something off of this, or you want to go back and see something or hear something that might have been in one of our sessions, that we'll have those links on our website so that you can also, you know, go back and see these videos and rewatch or get some points that you might have missed for tonight or any other session. I also wanted to thank Council Member Pam Sopal for coming tonight. It's so great to see our council members, you know, as part of our group. So thank you for coming. And then for tonight, our speakers is Ashley Neville. She's an architectural historian. She's also a tax credit consultant. She's been doing it for many years, and it's just been great gleaning off of our phone conversation. So thank you for coming and presenting your knowledge to everybody. And then we also have Eliot Clark, who is with Stonewall Construction. And Eliot and Ashley have also worked together. And so what we hope that we can show you guys tonight is that kind of the beginning process of you know, what you need to do to put your paperwork in, and then go through the construction process. And then obviously afterwards, what most people don't know is that there's paperwork at the end. So between these two, we're hoping that that can kind of fill in the gaps. And then hopefully we see you come back at a different session where we have, you know, DHR come in. We have a couple of representatives that are going to come in and show you what it is on the government side as to what their criteria is and, you know, what they need you to produce. So hope you guys have a great night tonight, and we'll leave it to you guys to come forward.
Thank you, Hope. I'm Ashley Neville, and I'm an architectural historian, and most of what I do anymore is tax credit consulting. And just so everybody understands what I do, I'm a consultant. I get paid by the property owner to do their tax credit application. I don't work for the state, I don't work for the county, I don't work for the town. I work for myself and for the property owner. I get lots of questions, or lots of people think I work for the state or the locality, but I don't. What I do is interface with them between you, the property owner, and the state, and if you're applying for federal credits, the National Park Service as well. So what are historic tax credits? They are a credit on your income taxes. If you are doing a state-only project, it is a credit on your state income taxes. If you're doing both the state and federal tax credit project, it's a credit on your federal income taxes. Nobody's going to hand you a check at the end of your project unless you sell or syndicate your credits. And I'll get into that later. But there's a couple of things you need to understand about historic tax credits. First is, how does your building qualify for a historic tax credit? The first thing, it either needs to be individually listed on the National Register of Historic Places, or if you're going for state credits only, it has to be determined eligible for the National Register. Or if your building is in a historic district, it has to be a contributing resource in that historic district. And you must spend enough money to qualify for the credits. The credits are not designed for routine maintenance. They are designed for a major rehabilitation project. So, and I'm going to talk about both state and federal credits. Most people here, if they're doing their own house, they're only going to qualify for state credits, but I want you to have the information for the federal credits as well. So if you're doing federal credits, you must spend 100% of the adjusted basis in your building only, not the building and the land, just the building. And your adjusted basis is your purchase price, less any depreciation you've taken, and plus any improvements you've already made to your building. For state credits, for an owner-occupied home, you have to spend 25% of the assessed value of the building only for the year prior to beginning your project. So if you begin a project in 2025, you would look at the assessed value of your house in 2024. And it just applies to the buildings. Don't put land in there. For commercial buildings for state credits, you must spend 50% of the assessed value of the building in the year prior to beginning the project. And you'll hear a lot more about this when the speakers from the Virginia Department of Historic Resources come. Everything first goes through them, and then if you're applying for federal credits, then they send it up to the National Park Service, and the Park Service will approve it for the federal credit. So one of the big questions I always get is what qualifies for the historic credit, because perhaps not everything you're doing will qualify for the credit. Almost all of your hard costs, excluding acquisition costs, if you're just buying a house and you want to rehab it, your acquisition costs do not count. Appliances do not count. Additions do not count. Landscaping does not count. And mainly for commercial buildings, parking lots do not count as an eligible expense. I think I have a list, if anybody wants a handout, of what qualifies and what does not qualify. Other items that do qualify that you might not think would qualify, construction interest, just for the period of construction, that interest would qualify. Any architecture or engineering fees qualifies. Insurance fees related to construction. Reasonable construction management costs will qualify. DHR and NPS review fees will qualify. They charge a fee to review your Part 2. That qualifies. CPA cost will qualify, and my fee will qualify. So a lot of your soft cost will qualify. Like I said, the things that do not qualify are additions, appliances, parking lots, and landscaping. They do not qualify. And if you have any questions, just stop me. There are 3 parts to a tax credit application. Part 1 is generally a description of your property and a little bit of the history, and you have to attach the part of the National Register nomination that has your building in it. So the Part 1 is essentially saying we qualify for tax credits because we are listed on the National Register. Part 2 is really the meat and potatoes of your application project, and it's an item-by-item list of elements of the building, what it looks like now, and what you're going to do to it. And a big part of both Part 1 and Part 2 applications are photographs. You have to photograph all of the exterior and all of the interior. And they do care what you do to the interior. A lot of people think they're just concerned about the exterior, but they really look hard at what you're doing to the interior of the building. So once you submit that, they will send you back a letter, sometimes with a list of things that you have to do in order to qualify for credits. And a lot of times you're going to need to submit an amendment to answer their questions about your project. When your project is done, you're going to go back and take the after photographs that prove you did what you said you were going to do in the Part 2. And they're not going to take your word for anything. You have to prove it, and you have to prove it with photographs. And if you start a project before you submit your application, and you should always submit your application prior to beginning your project. If you don't have before pictures, if you don't have photographs of what the building looked like before you started your project, you don't have a project. You will not be able to get historic tax credits without before photographs. So at the end, when you submit your Part 3, you're also required with that to submit an agreed upon procedures for projects less than $500,000 or an audit for projects that cost $500,000 and up. And Eliot's going to talk a little bit more about that. You have to hire a CPA to do the audit or the AUP at the end of the project. And that's why the CPA fee is an eligible expense. Some do's and don'ts about tax credits. And the one I just said, if you don't have 4 photographs, you don't have a project. That's very important. You should submit the Part 1 and 2 before you begin the project. You cannot paint unpainted brick. That will kill your project. That by itself will kill the project. You cannot remove windows unless they are too far gone to repair. And when I say too far gone to repair, I mean the windows are hanging there in bits and pieces. If that's the shape of your window, you can probably replace it. But a lot of people want to replace their windows for energy efficiency. You're going to have to keep your existing window unless it's too far gone to repair. But you can always use storm windows. Both exterior and interior storm windows are approvable, and they are an applicable, a qualified expense. So storm windows is the way you're going to get energy efficiency if you can't replace your windows. And 9 times out of 10, you cannot replace the windows. You cannot cover wood siding with either vinyl or aluminum siding. That's a no-no. They will not approve that. They will also not approve vinyl windows. I've never gotten anything vinyl approved for anything. If you have to replace the wood siding, because it's too far gone to save, you're probably on your primary facade, on the front of the building, or anything that's visible from the street, you're probably going to go back with lapped wood siding. On the rear, or if you have an addition, you may be able to get cementitious siding as an alternative. That would be hardy plank or hardy panel, depending on what you're doing. Do not replace your roof covering until you get approval. If you've got a metal roof on your building, you're probably going to have to go back with a metal roof. If you've got a slate roof, you're probably going to have to go back with a slate roof. They are not going to let you replace a standing seam metal roof with shingles. You're going to have to keep the same type of roof you've got now. What else? Back to what I said, they really care about what you do to the interior of the building. And so while they will allow some changes to the floor plan, they're not going to allow a whole lot of changes to the floor plan, particularly in the most public areas of the building. In a house, that would be if you have a hallway, particularly with a stair in it. So they're not going to let you change the stair unless the stair is falling apart, but you're going to have to put it back the way it was. You're not going to be able to truncate a hall, say at the back of the hall to put in a bathroom. They're not going to allow that. They will not allow you to extend the wall beneath the stair so that you can put a closet or a bathroom underneath the stair. Anything in the very public rooms is pretty much going to have to stay the way it is. They're not going to allow many changes for that. The further back from the front of the house and the further up you go, you get more leeway in what you can and cannot do to the building. If you want to replace something that is existing, but you think it's not original to the property, you have to prove that. But if you can prove that this is a modern addition, then they may allow you to make those changes. So that's, I will say a couple of houses, because I used to walk up here at lunch, that I watched being rehabbed on Duncan Street. And not to pick on this one house, it obviously was not a tax credit project because nothing they did would get approved, but it was a red brick house with metal casement windows. And now it's got wood windows and they painted the brick. And so that's an example of a rehab of a house that is just not going to qualify for tax credits. That's sort of the end of my spiel, but if you've got questions, I'm happy to answer them. I know I've thrown a lot at you in a short period of time. But, and what I do is fill out the application. I can't tell you how to fix something. I can tell you whether you will be allowed to fix it. But I'm not the be-all. I'm not going to make the final decision. The final decisions are made by the reviewers at the Virginia Department of Historic Resources and National Park Service. Does anybody have any questions? Yes.
This is about what kind of residences qualify. You mentioned that if you're in a historic district, and I think you said it has to be a contributing
Resource to the historic district.
What does that mean?
And Ashland has one historic district?
No, we have three. We have three.
Oh, we have three. These are national register districts?
Yes. We have
Well,
three.
That's right, you've got Randolph-Macon. When the nomination was written, they have to list each property within the boundaries. And on that list, beside the address of the property, there's going to be, if it's a non-contributing resource, they will put NC beside it. They typically don't put C for contributing. It's just assumed if you don't have an NC beside your property address, then you're contributing. But so you would have to look up, and that's what I have to do for the Part 1, and you have to include parts of the National Register nomination that include the inventory list and mark the property that's being rehabbed. But that's how you find out. And DHR has that information on their website. It's a little bit more convoluted now than it used to be, but if you go to their website and you pick historic registers, and you have to go through several pages, and you finally get to one that says online listing, and you pick that, and then you pick, for Ashland, you would have to pick Hanover County because Ashland's not an independent city. So you would pick Hanover County, and then you would scroll through the list of properties that are listed in Hanover, and it's not that many, for the districts in Ashland. And then you open that nomination, and you get a big picture and a little blurb, and then you have to open the nomination itself and go to the inventory list to find out whether your building contributes or not. So it's a little convoluted, a lot more than it used to be. Yes?
I just wanted to say, if you discover, if you find your house and there's an NC next to it, that's not the last word. Because the DHR in some cases, there's so many buildings, more than 200 in the main district. They misdated some. One house I know of was the Nolly house up on, it's on the campus, was built in before 1858, and they had it as 1955. And I don't know why.
Right.
I guess that, but there are some that we didn't go through every single house when we were doing that and figure out what the date was.
Well,
Yeah.
that's where your Part 1 is
Yeah.
important, because you have to get that worked out in your Part 1, ideally before you would start the Part 2, because the Part 2 application is the bulk of the work. So you would have to get that straightened out with your Part 1. If in fact it's not a mistake that was made when the nomination was written, and there are lots of mistakes, like I was at one today where in Fairfax City has a historic district, believe it or not. And, but my project building is listed as another building. And so I have to get that straight in the Part 1 so that the right building gets the credits. So there are mistakes, particularly in early nominations, and the one in Fairfax City is pretty early. There tend to be more mistakes the older the nomination is, but you need to get that worked out in the Part 1. Yes?
If you do work on a house that would qualify, but the work that you have done doesn't qualify, and then you sell, does the person who buys the house, where do they stand?
They don't have anything to do with it at all. I mean,
Can they apply for a tax credit?
yes, somebody does work on a house, and then they sell the house, the new owners, I mean, that's where they start.
Okay.
So they are not penalized by what somebody else did to the property. So they sort of get a clean slate when they bought the house. Now, and that may be one of the things that they would want to change, what the previous owners did. A lot of times you can tell by the architecture, by the way it was built, that it was modern. But that's one of the things they would need to have some evidence that these changes were made more recently and are not historic, and therefore you should be able to change them. Yes.
You said the qualifications are different for residences versus commercial buildings. What makes that determination? Because some of our commercial buildings have been turned into residences, and some of our residences are now commercial buildings.
All right.
Is it how it's zoned?
No. In order to qualify for federal credits, I think that's where the issue that you're talking about lies. In order to qualify for federal credits, it has to be an income-producing building. And in order to qualify then for federal credits, you have to spend 100% of your adjusted basis in the building. If it's a house and it's an owner-occupied house, then you're not going to qualify for federal credits. You're only going to qualify for state credits. And that bar is a lot lower for state credits for owner-occupied homes. That's 25% of the previous year's assessed value. If you're applying only for state credits for commercial building, you have to spend 50% of the previous year's assessed value. But only commercial properties are going to qualify for federal credits.
And the definition of commercial is that it generates revenue?
Income producing. It has to be income producing.
So,
I mean, you could theoretically, if you can meet the substantial rehab test is what I've been talking about, rehab a house and rent it out, and that would qualify for federal credits.
I'm thinking about the old used drugstore, and I mean, the top half is it residential, or is it because they're renting it as the Tinder guest house, is that considered commercial?
I would-
The bottom half is Origin Brewery, which.
Yeah, I mean, it's a commercial building with like an apartment upstairs, or either the owners live upstairs. But the bulk of the building would be commercial and would qualify for federal credits, I believe. But that's another thing you would want to get straight before you started the project.
Okay.
Yes.
So, let's assume that you have before pictures, when you started a project, but you haven't applied for the tax credits. Does that basically void your?
Now, if you've got before photographs, I mean, that's the key thing, because so many people do rehabs, and for state credits only, you can submit the Part 1, 2, and 3 at the same time. I don't recommend it, but you can do that as long as you've got those before photographs. I know there was one property I worked on years ago, and they started the process, or they had a meeting with DHR and started the process, and they had before photographs. But one of the property owners died, and the her husband could not find the before photographs. And so we ended up going through family photograph albums to find enough interior photographs so that we could show what the interior of the house, the exterior of the house. I mean, there were plenty of photographs of the exterior of the house, but we went through all these photo albums, you know, and so we've got lots of pictures of people sitting on sofas, but it shows the wall behind it, you know, so that's really hard to do. That's why before photographs are so important. But yeah, you can submit the part 1, 2, and 3 at the same time. You're probably not going to get an approved part 3 right off the bat. You may have to make some changes to what you've done. Years ago, I talked to a woman in Northern Virginia who had already rehabbed her house, had the before photographs, but a lot of what they'd done to the house would not qualify. They had exposed all the brick in the kitchen, you know. Unless they could prove that historically the brick was exposed in the kitchen, DHR is not going to approve it, because more than likely it was plastered, given the date of the house. And so I think she ended up talking to somebody at DHR, but she ultimately was not going to qualify for tax credits because of what they had done. Even though she had the before pictures, they did things that DHR is not going to approve.
Do they typically say if you had plaster originally, you have to go back and plaster?
Yes.
Oh, they do?
Yes.
Or sheetrock.
Or drywall?
Well, it depends on how old the plaster is and in what shape the plaster is in. If the plaster is literally falling off the walls, then you can take it off and go back with sheetrock. But if it just needs repairing, they're going to want you to repair it rather than take it down and replace it with sheetrock.
I have an example.
Yes.
Of that in my house. It was in the kitchen, and it was most of the plaster was maybe cracked, and they just repaired it. It was easier anyway. And then there was one wall where it was totally delaminated.
Yeah.
And that just wasn't going to work. So, and it was a very small area, so they sheetrocked that one area. And that was allowed.
Right. But if the inside of your building is predominantly plaster and it's in good shape except for some hairline cracks, they're going to want you to keep it. Now, I realize good plasters are hard to come by.
But they're there.
Huh?
There are good plasters.
They're there if you look hard enough. Another thing that's hard to find is, and Eliot can speak to this more than I can, are good masons. If you have a brick house and you need repointing done, that's a difficult project, and you need to find a mason. If you have to replace the brick, you need to match the existing brick. The mortar, the new mortar has to match the historic mortar in texture, in consistency, in color is very important. I mean, it used to be people that do tax credit developers all the time now know that you cannot automatically replace windows. And so that has ceased to be so much of a problem as it was when I first started doing this. But bad repointing, really bad repointing will get your project rejected also.
I remember working in a national park area, and they pointed out, this was in Petersburg, where they had replaced the mortar in some areas of a building with regular mortar, and...
You mean with Portland cement?
Yeah. And the old cement...
The old mortar.
The old mortar freezes and expands at a different rate than the
Portland cement.
Portland cement, and it caused more damage. So they had
Yeah, you can't use Portland cement. I mean, Eliot can
It'll
talk
snap
about it.
your bricks.
Yeah.
Will
Yeah,
cause
just
a lot of
totally.
damage.
Yeah.
Everything crumbles.
Yes.
So what about nonprofits or churches who don't necessarily have?
They don't have income
They
taxes.
don't have income taxes.
Then you have to, and maybe Eliot can help here.
I've done one of those.
I mean, like Hanover Tavern, they use tax credits, they're a nonprofit. But if you're a nonprofit, you have to create a for-profit entity to basically sell your credits to them. Normally, the credits go to the person that spends the money to rehab the building. They are the person that gets the credits. But if you don't have any income tax and you're a nonprofit, then you have to create another entity that is for profit and can take the credits and use them or sell them. And you will get X number of cents on the dollar. I don't know how much it is anymore. So if you sell the credits, you're not going to get a dollar for dollar. Like if you have $100,000 worth of credits and you sell them, you're maybe going to get $70,000. You're not going to get $100,000. But that's the way nonprofits use historic tax credits. The caveat there is if you're a small nonprofit, the legal fees to do that may make it cost prohibitive, and the legal fees are not an eligible expense. So it can be done. It's done a lot, actually, but there's additional hoops to jump through if you're a nonprofit. And if you're rehabbing a church, I mean, if it's no longer a church, it's very hard to turn a church into something else because DHR and MPS are not going to allow you to subdivide the sanctuary space. Masonic Temple is the same way because they have big spaces that are their ritual spaces, and the reviewers are not going to let you subdivide that. You could put in something like, you know, modular offices. That would work. Something that's not permanent. You're not going to be able to put in permanent walls if you've got a big open space. Like a historic courthouse, you're going to have to keep the courthouse, the courtroom open. Now, I had a project that was actually a courthouse in Forsyth County, North Carolina, and that was rehabbed into apartments. All the offices were turned into the apartments, but the courtrooms had to stay open. And so they used the large courtroom for their amenity space. They put in a glass block for, you know, a meeting room or yoga or something like that. So you can work around it, but it's difficult. And I don't know, other than a church, of a building here, except for the theater. Like you couldn't take the theater and turn it into apartments. First of all, there's no windows, but you know, they're not going to let you subdivide that big open space. So I'm going to let Eliot talk, and he can, oh, one more.
Yeah, I do have one more question.
Yeah.
I had a tree fall on the house, and I submitted the Part 1 for tax credits, but then I found out that the insurance company was taking, excuse me, was taking longer. You have a 2-year limit, correct?
You have, that's very confusing. There is a 24-month measuring period for you to expend your money to meet the substantial rehab test. But as long as you can meet your substantial rehab test, you can take longer than 2 years. What you don't want to do is spend a bunch of money up front and then let the project sit for several years and then start up again and spend more money in the back end. And believe it or not, your measuring period starts when your project ends, and you have to look back 24 months. And if it's been more than 24 months, then you spent most of your money up front, then you're not going to meet your substantial rehab test. But you can take longer than 2 years to finish the project as long as you meet that 24-month substantial rehab test that starts when you end your project and you look back. It's very confusing.
My second question would be, because I received money from the insurance company to rebuild, would I qualify?
The insurance money, you're going to have to disallow the insurance money. Only the money you personally spend out of your pocket is going to qualify for tax credits. Yeah. So, but you know, ordinarily, if you didn't get any insurance money or it didn't cover much, the the expenses that you paid for usually would qualify for historic tax credits.
That's that percentage.
25%.
Yes. And there's another house here in Ashland, and I think, you know, I said this is not designed for routine maintenance, but she was able to spend enough money to qualify for her substantial rehab test, so 25%, by painting her house and replacing the roof. Those are the only two things she did. She barely qualified, but she qualified, and she got tax credits for doing those two things.
Because they were major.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're major things.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and it depends on where you are in your life of depreciation
Yes.
with your mortgage. So it adds up. If you've been in your house for a while
Mm-hmm.
and you've depreciated the value down, that's what your basis is measured off of. So
Right.
But that's commercial, though.
That's commercial.
Yeah.
For owner-occupied homes, it's 25% of the assessed value in the year prior to starting the project. Now, a couple of years ago, that really messed up houses in Richmond. I've sort of forgotten how it worked. I guess it was 2008, and things were not selling what they had been, but their assessed value was still really high. And
we were buying houses for $20,000, $30,000, and $40,000 in Highland Park, and they might have been assessed for $200,000.
Right.
And so you were buying them at $20,000, and you could substantiate X amount of dollars for the renovation, but maybe not 100%.
right.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Wow.
yeah, but we don't have that problem right now.
No.
So anyway, so I'll turn this over to Eliot. Is this your water? No, you've got your water.
Thank you, Ashley. I'm Eliot Clark. I am the owner of Stonewall Construction. I am also a property owner. So as I am talking to you guys today, I'm going to try to speak more on the construction side of things, but I will tell you that a lot of the projects that I approach, I am also the owner of the project. So it's more like light development. But what I wanted to talk to you guys about today is the value of historic fabric in the buildings and construction. So I'm going to open up. I've just got a few pictures that we'll follow along with. And I like to start with some basic attributes and things that we look at when we're going into our buildings. This is a nice old crystal glass knob, and it doesn't look overly significant, but when you go into a building and it's full of these pieces of hardware, there's a lot of value in something like this to maintain. And what we do when we go into projects is we make sure that everybody that's going to come in to remove anything understands the value of the historic fabric that they're about to be working with. And so at our company, we're focused on historic restoration. I tell the guys, make sure that if you take a piece of hardware off of a door, you have a 1-gallon Ziploc bag, and you're going to write the door that it came off of, and you're going to take all of the components of that hardware, and you're going to put them in the same Ziploc bag, and then you're going to get the pleasure of putting them in a crock pot and cleaning off all of the old paint, and then you're going to get to put them on a buffer, and you're going to get to buff them back to their original glory, and then we might have to get some parts to rebuild the inside of this lock. None of that is required. None of that is necessary. But that fabric is available in the spaces, and it's nice to be able to preserve things that are going to last a lot longer than what you would buy if you go to Lowe's or Home Depot or Pleasance, because a lock set made 100 years ago was made to last for hundreds and hundreds of years. So putting it back together has a very inherent value for the owner. The first couple of pictures, this is an inlay of a floor at 509 West Clay Street, which I think was probably built in the early 1800s. It's in Jackson Ward. No, this isn't Jackson Ward in Richmond. I'm just trying to show some of the things that constitute historic fabric that are of interest and would be qualified expenditures while you're doing your renovation. So with this particular house, with this inlay, we picked up the different types of wood and we recreated the inlay to match, because the majority of it was there and we knew that we could rebuild it, and it offered, I mean, it's beautiful, but it was a neat thing to find, and it was covered up with some really great shag carpet and had been covered up for probably 30 or 40 years. Yeah, this is just a side profile of that mortise lock. I was just showing you guys a lock set. I know that when I put something like this back into service that it's going to last a very long time. And so I think it's always interesting to encourage people to be aware, hey, when you're touching these buildings, and they do have legitimate historic fabric, to take the time and to spend the money to do it right. And that's one of the reasons that they're giving you tax credits, is because they have recognized that they're contributing factors to the neighborhood and they're worth salvaging. The trim that's in this particular picture, this is from also not in Ashland. This is at 301 South Arthur Ashe Boulevard in Richmond. But the trim here, all of the trim on this door would be from the first cut of North America. So these would be trees that got to grow unencumbered by harvest. And while it may not have been the center of the tree, it's part of a tree that probably got to grow for about 400 years without being touched. So the wood is much denser and much heavier than the things that are speed grown that we buy in lumber yards today. So that lumber is going to last a lot longer. This is a picture of that house in Jackson Ward that had that inlay. And I included this because I wanted to talk about what happens when you want to put a kitchen in a space that has windows. And maybe you need to go across those windows to achieve your cabinet layout. In this instance, our original windows were there. The glass in the windows was easily 200 years old. And so I made sure my guys knew, like, we're not going to do anything to the wood or the window assemblies. We're gonna take them apart, put them back together, and they're gonna work. And then we're gonna put cabinets in front of them and granite countertops in front of them with a raised backsplash. That raised backsplash on the backside, when you look at it, it's all painted black. So from the outside, when you're looking in, you just see the absence of something. You don't see the back of the granite countertop that you guys see. You don't see the back of the cabinets. So it just kind of disappears. So when you're looking at the window, there's just this void. But those windows function. They work really well. In fact, this kitchen burned before we even put it in service. And the firemen came through these windows and they were able to open them because we hadn't put the locks on yet. So they didn't even trash the windows, which was really nice. And so those windows are still in place. They survived a fire. This is a bathroom where I want to point out that there's a window in a tub. And while that doesn't feel like a really good idea, that window was in that tub when they built the building 100 years ago. And so we realized that it's going to be in our shower space, and we've got a shower curtain rod around it. And so what we did is we braced our shower curtain rod with the piece of metal inside the window. And it's not terribly significant, but what we did to protect the window in the wood here is we brought a shower curtain across. So that's what this rod is going to do. It allowed us to protect the window without having to put a piece of glass inside the window, without having to put glass on top of the trim. We can still see the trim. It can be in the bathroom, and we just know it's something that we're going to have to paint. But again, that wood is very, very old and very substantial, and it will hold up to being in that shower. It's been in that shower for over 100 years. It'll be in that shower for hundreds of years to come, as long as we keep paint on it and take care of it. The other thing that's in here is a medicine cabinet. And that medicine cabinet is something that we realize is important. It's been there, and we want to preserve it in its space. So we make sure that if we take that down, its hardware gets cleaned the same way as that door hardware, and it all gets put back on, and it gets to continue to eat. When we bought this building's pretty funny because I've got some before pictures. I did not include a before picture of this tub but it was encased in this really less than attractive wooden, I don't know, they boxed it out and put panels on it. And it looked, I bet it was really cool in 1970, but it needed to come out. And so we took it out. And under it was this gorgeous bathtub that's almost 7 feet long. And the outside of it, I wish I had it, I looked earlier for a good picture of it, but it has the original enamel on the outside of the tub, and it's in perfect shape. So that hideous wooden box they put around it just preserved it and took care of it until we got to it. And we reglazed the inside because we couldn't preserve the porcelain, but these tubs look amazing. And when we show these apartments, people are floored by the fact that that tub's been there the whole time. It didn't move during construction. We didn't take it out. It's been sitting there in the same spot since the building was built. Ashley touched on this a little bit. When you're going to a project, if something exists at your house when you get there, like, for example, the renovation that you were talking about, if the house is already painted and the windows were already put in, but you go to do the renovation and you meet the substantial rehabilitation test, you don't have to undo any of those things. There just has to be enough fabric, historic fabric, that your project gets approved. So I've never installed vinyl windows in my career. I've never had the luxury of doing it. We take the old wooden windows out, we rebuild them, we replace all the sash parts, we're all putting ropes in and making sure the wheels turn. And the way they built them 150 years ago is the way we rebuild them. And we even have a big box. Those windows are enormous. You don't realize how big they are. They have huge boxes on the left and right that the weights travel in. And so we have one of those pulled out of a wall, and it's always fun to show my new employees, like, that's what that window looks like. This is how it came to the project 150 years ago. And it takes 2 men to pick that thing up and put it into, or 2 people, I should say, to put it into a window hole because it is so massive. It's not like a modern window. It's a lot more complicated. So what's interesting is with this porch, I don't know if you guys can see that notch. I'll try to expand it. This notch is where there was a mid-rail on this front porch. And it's very obvious that that rail was there. And there's ghosting on the brick wall behind it. I think we could have gone to DHR and asked if we could put that rail back in because it separates the front porch for 2 apartments that share it. But instead, we just left it notched out like it was, and we decided not to divide the porches. But if we had wanted to do that, that's the amendment process, and that's where you go back to the Department of Historic Resources and you say, can I do this? And there's nothing wrong with going back and asking questions. The pitfall is if you decide to do something and you didn't ask permission, because you might be undoing it at your expense. So it's very important, and I think it's to have an open line of communication with whoever your reviewer is at the Department of Historic Resources. I mean, they're there for you to tap into. So I love this picture. There are not a lot of pictures of my kids in these, but this is my daughter, and we're looking at a building before we purchased it, and we'll call this an exercise pole that goes from the floor to the ceiling. And this is the vantage point from the kitchen, and I'm about to show you the kitchen, but this is the same room below it. So I'm hoping you guys can see that this door where this lady is standing is this door. Yeah, you just can't tell, but that's the difference. So this space, all cleaned up and painted, is this space. And then I'm going to show you what it looks like the other way. So here's the other side of the exercise pole. And this door that leads into the hallway. And then this is what that room looks like after the renovation. So we preserved the trim in the space. We preserved the molding in the space. And we were able to put the kitchen in that space. So it looks completely different, and it operates completely differently now. We were able to increase the good usable space in the apartment by putting the kitchen in this room. And it's really nice to have a double parlor. The Department of Historic Resources let us put our kitchen in this second parlor off of the first parlor. The first parlor is one of those primary spaces where you're not really going to get to do much. It's kind of like the foyer of the house. You have to just accept it for what it is. and fix it in kind. Don't try to manipulate those primary spaces. Like your primary hallway, they just don't want you to interfere with that space. This is a hallway, a rear hallway of a house on West Avenue in Richmond. And I wanted to share this with you because this door is blocked off. This was the original door, and we closed it. And then behind the door, we built 2 walls. And we insulated both walls, and we sheetrocked both walls, and we caulked the base of each wall. And behind that door is a full kitchen of another apartment. And what we were trying to do was to dam the noise transfer. We didn't want any noise coming from the kitchen of the front apartment into this. This is a hallway in the rear of the first floor, and it was already there. So the kitchen was there, so we were able to put it back there. And we just figured that we could do a really good job of fighting the noise attenuation if no noise came through this door. And we did a really good job, but you can't tell. I mean, the idea is the door's there. That's what it looked like when it went in 100 years ago. And that's what we're trying to represent. It's like, how much of this fabric can we keep in place while we're using the spaces, if we're trying to change them? Now, if this was a home and you wanted to open that and make that opening bigger, the Department of Historic Resources may allow you, because it's the door entering a rear hallway, to make that opening larger, but you're probably still going to need to represent that there was a wall there, and they're going to tell you about how big they'll feel comfortable with that opening becoming. And they would prefer for that opening to be there. But if you just have to have a larger opening, that's something you would ask for, and you may not get approved. Those are the kind of things that come back, and so you have to pick and choose what you're gonna accept and what you're not. I love this picture. This is a job that Ashley and I did when I was in my 20s. And it might have been, I think this was my 3rd project. This door was there when I bought the house, and it's clearly not the original door. It was ugly then. It's still ugly now. It's still there now, and I never took it down. I actually have bought the other door to put it in. I found one that matches, and I just haven't gotten around to putting it in. So that door is still there. But because somebody took it out, and they installed it before I purchased the building, when I did the renovation, painting that door was a qualified expense. Leaving that door is fine. I could have elected to replace it, but it would have needed to look like the one next to it. But I left it because I just didn't have a whole lot of money when I was doing the renovation, and it's still there today. So every time I see it, it makes me giggle a little bit. And also in this picture, that decking is not at all a representation of what would have been there originally, but it was there, and it's still holding up just fine, so I left it. I didn't see any need to jack up the front porch to replace the decking that was already there and was perfectly fine.
So what would have been original?
I believe it would have been 3 1/4 Douglas fir or heart pine, tongue and groove.
Tongue and groove.
Yeah, it would be a nice tongue and groove.
Deck.
Yeah.
But I mean, Ellie's raising a very good point. If it's there, you can keep it. You don't have to change it. If your windows have been changed out and put in vinyl windows, you can keep them. But if you start fiddling with them, then you have to go back with the appropriate thing.
Terabodies and buy it.
Well, they don't like you switching historic parts around.
That's right. They don't want
They would rather
you.
you not go and buy an old mantle that did not come out of your house and install it.
They'd rather you do what?
Build it new.
Yeah, they don't want you, and I'm going to show you some, I hope I put some pictures of modern trim in here, but they don't want you to recreate the past.
Right.
If you have enough historic fabric in your place to qualify for a tax credit project, then honor the historic fabric that you have, and anything else, differentiate. Instead of going back with some beautiful fluted piece of trim that cost a lot more money, you can go back with a 1x4 or a 1x6. The scale can be similar, but it shouldn't represent something that looks historic if you don't know what was there. So we're going to talk about what was there and what wasn't.
Can I ask a question?
Please.
Columns that you have in that photo.
Yes, ma'am.
The ones you worked on when you were younger.
It is.
It is?
Uh-huh.
Okay, because I was wondering with having the columns there, I know that they're very old.
Yeah, those are the original wooden columns, and those are the original rails and spindles on the first floor. Now, what I didn't have is on the second floor, when I purchased this building, I did not have the second floor balustrade. It was gone. And so what I did was I went back and found pictures of the porch.
That's why I was.
And I get, so that's, actually, we're going there next, so that's great. I don't even have to skip ahead. I think,
What your neighbors' porches look like, what
It-
you try to simulate what they.
here we go. So this is, just gonna show you this. I'm gonna go a little bit forward and then come back. So I purchased a building on Main Street, and this is what it looked like when I bought it. This is a polar bear that's been knocked over. But this is really, like, when I bought this building, this is what it looked like. And so for me to determine what I could do, I went back, and this picture was in the city registry, so I was able to find this on their assessor's card, and it says that this was a truck lettering place. And this particular building has a huge warehouse where people would pull in their 18-wheelers, and they would paint the letters on the sides of the building. So it has this enormous, really strange warehouse in the middle of the fan district, which is great for me, because I like to keep old stuff. So I went back and found some pictures, and we were able to find some historic pictures of these two buildings that I just showed you. And what's nice is the neighbors still had their front porches as well, and they are very clearly the same architect. And they are very clearly the same building. They had the same stained glass windows, that everything about the profile was the same. And so we were able to present these pictures to DHR, and we asked if we could rebuild our original porches. And they said yes. So we got to get rid of those beautiful blue awnings and those metal rails. So we took everything off. I'll blow this up so you guys can see. So we took everything back, and we also had to take the concrete slab up. I wish we could have kept it, but they had put a topping slab on top of what was there, and a lot of freezing happened. They didn't have proper drainage for the gutters, and so the slab got ruined, and we needed to replace it. And so if you look down the line, you can kind of see the similarity of our new wooden column to the other porch in the distance, because we use that also to say, hey, we think this is what was there. And the Department of Historic Resources agreed with us, and they let us put it back. And so this is those front porches with a flat lock copper roof and a beautiful new rail system. And the rails match the rails of the house down the street, because we were able to say, okay, we got the scale right. And we think that they really were a match. They allowed us to do that. So we used the same spindle profile. But everything is wooden. There's no vinyl or plastic in any of this construction. It's all nice. These rails are made out of poplar. The spindles were actually cut out of heart pine, which cost an arm and a leg. And then all of the fascia and soffit, all of the things up at the top, we did out of old growth lumber from E.T. Moore. They have a really nice salvage yard in town, and they get lumber from all over the country. And they're really good about recognizing our need for having old wood to go back and repair things with. Because if you're going to spend all the money to repair a fascia or soffit, you might want to do it with a piece of lumber that got to grow for 400 years. It's going to hold up for 100 years outside. So you're not doing it again in 10 years.
Wait, let me interject here, before you leave that, that picture. When you're dealing with railings, what you see there is it has a top railing, the spindles, and then a bottom rail. And that,
And space under that. under
Yeah.
the bottom,
if you've got to replace a porch railing, it has to be like that, what they call the Richmond rail,
Yeah.
which is a top rail, the spindles, and a bottom rail. You can't put a railing back that looks like something at the beach, where the pickets are just attached to either there's not a bottom rail or they're just attached on the outside. The spindles have to be between the two rails, or they're not going to approve it.
And you can't see in this picture, but the profile of that bottom rail is an A, and so that it sheds water, and the spindles sit on top of that. There are some rail profiles that have a flat top at the base, and I would say stay away from those because that's a really great place for water to settle. And also, if water is sitting there on that flat area, wood drinks water. So those spindles that you've put in are going to suck that water up. And it's going to be, as much as it's pulling that water and then pushing it out and pulling it in and pushing it out, it's going to dehydrate it, and you're going to have rotten wood pretty quickly. Which is why you use old growth lumber, because there's not as much pulp to suck that water in. It's got really dense rings because it got a long time to grow, and it's going to hold up really well outside compared to something that got the speed grow in Canada for 10 years and got cut and is mostly pulp. Like, that's delicious for termites. But if you get something that's got a lot of sap in it and will hold up for a long period of time, that's worth your while.
It's like an iron,
Yeah.
trying to put a nail in that.
There's another picture, just another, this one turned out really well. This is our office, so.
But
Question
Yeah.
about the building, so it's painted brick? But
Yeah.
You were able to paint it because...
It was already painted.
Oh, I see.
So great question. Let's go back to what it looked like when the polar bear was knocked over in the front. Because it was a dog when I bought it. That's what it looked like. And it was painted. And we scraped. So we actually did this. We scraped back to see if we thought we could get the paint on the front of the building off of the building. And that little bit of scraping probably took one of my guys 3 days. Because you cannot mess up the surface of the brick.
Yeah, you cannot,
You can't
sandblast.
power wash. You can't, if you power wash too hard, you can mess up the
Right.
surface of the brick. So if you're going to power wash, you can put a chemical on, and then you can lightly power wash that chemical off, but you cannot mess up the finish of the brick.
And what kind of paint was it originally painted with?
Oh, it's just a latex paint or an oil-based paint.
Oh, okay.
I mean, there could be gobs of lead-based paint under there. I don't know. We painted over it. So,
Yeah, if it's already painted, you can repaint the brick. It's a lot harder to take the paint off the brick.
and you could damage the brick by doing
Yeah.
that.
I lived on Hanover Avenue, and my wife really wanted to paint our house, and it had this beautiful pale brick with ore in it. And so for her 40th birthday, I told her, I was like, if you want to paint the house, we'll paint it. And I told her, it's against my belief that we should not do it, but if you're adamant about it, that we've been here for a decade, fine, go for it. And then the school across the street burned. And she was like, we're moving. I was like, oh, I'm so glad we didn't paint the house. And we sold it, and the people who bought it did not paint it either. So we're very happy that it's still the original. I'm thrilled that it's still the original brick. I'm surprised the house isn't pink. I was going to talk, do's and don'ts are always fun. One of the things that we throw around in our office a lot is don't cut historic trim. We take the time when we're pulling it off of walls to number it and label it. We talk about how to get the nails out of the trim without ruining the face of the trim. So if I pull a piece of trim off, I'm not going to beat those nails through the front of it. I'm going to take a grinder and I'm going to cut the nail off in the back so I don't send that nail back through the face and disturb more of the front of the trim. I want to hold on to that profile. And I also don't feel like disturbing any paint that I don't have to disturb. So there's a lot going on with that statement, but if you can avoid cutting historic trim, you want to maintain as much of your fabric as you can. So I'm going to show you this. This picture looks fine, right? But this is good. This window trim is fully intact and it's wonderful. But somebody came over here, and when they installed this granite countertop, they cut the trim to slide the granite under it. And that's a humongous no-no. So I like to show people things like that, because the correct way to do it, we think, is, this is up in Church Hill, we took the countertop and we just brought it right in front of the trim. Because those countertops are probably going to get replaced sometime in the next 100 years. They don't have to. It took them millions of years to form. Granite's really tough, it's really hard, but people are fickle and they pull things out and they throw things away and they redo things. But that trim has been there uninterrupted for, we know, 150 years. And we hope it will continue to be there much longer. So I was very happy to see this and to see that they did a really good job preserving the trim in this project. All right, I think before and after pictures tell a lot of stories. Ashley talked about how if you have a metal roof, you might need to preserve your metal roof when you're doing a project. So on the right-hand side, this is a house in Highland Park. It's 3422, the one on the right is 3424 2nd Avenue. The one on the left is 3422 2nd Avenue. So the red metal roof was there. And I put this in there because this is something I renovated, I think, in 2010 or 2011. So I was thrilled to preserve the roof. It's gorgeous. I painted it red. I wanted it to look like a big red thumb. I wanted people to see it and be like, that looks great. So, and then we bought the house next door about 5 or 6 years later, and we renovated that. I'm going to show you what they looked like before I bought. Like when I bought them, they looked like this. They were gorgeous. These houses were humongous. I think I paid, I'm going to go out on a limb here. I think I paid $19,000 for the house on the right, and I think I might have paid $35,000 for the house on the left. And they were in great shape. That metal roof cleaned up so well. It was so easy to put it back into service. That house is brick. It was an awesome house to work on. It was a gorgeous house. The house on the left is stucco, and it has a slate roof. That slate roof, if I wanted to put that slate roof on that house today, it would probably cost me $80,000 or $90,000. And I got the house for $30,000. Like the roof was free. The house was free. I just paid for a third of the roof. So this is just kind of going through. We finished the house on the right first because it was one of our earlier projects. We hadn't purchased the house on the left. We sold the house on the right, and they pulled the roof off. It's okay. It's all right. Live and let live. It's all right. They can do it. It's totally fine. I did a tax credit renovation. It's what I do for a living. I know how to advise people on how to do it, and I appreciate the fabric that's there. They probably had a couple of roof leaks, and they had a roofer come out and say, this roof is 120 years old, man. You got to get rid of this, instead of just painting it and patching the few holes that were there. So they ripped off a roof that probably would have lasted them, I would say, another 75 years. And they put on a 30-year architectural shingle. But good for them. It looks nice. They feel good about it. They'll sell the house and move on. It's okay.
And I know, shallow, the roof that we have, so
It's a church.
the information that we were getting, because, we would have the leaks and things like that years ago. The roofer comes in and he tells you, and then the congregation's trying to decide what to do. They want to preserve how it looks, but then they're looking at the cost. And I can say, and I know growing up, we had, in our old house, we had the same type of roof, and we had the roofers would tell you different things. Well, this is going to be expensive for you to maintain, and down the road it's going to cost you. That's what they tell you. You don't know any better. You
Right.
don't know. So they're the experts, and you take their advice. Yeah, I hear exactly what you're saying.
And when you have a big group of people, especially when you're dealing with the church, it's hard for that group of people to make decisions. We partnered with a church probably about just before COVID. They were going to tear down 2 row houses in the fan. And the congregation had been talking about tearing these houses down for 40 years. That's a long time to make a decision. They finally decided to tear them down. And at the 11th hour, I went in and said, hey, I'd love to partner with you and do a pro bono project and keep these houses standing. And they were like, hey, it took us 40 years to decide to tear the houses down. And we've already signed a demolition contract, and you want us to undo that. And I was like, yeah, if you don't mind, I think it could be really beneficial to keep the houses. And they played ball, and they were awesome. As a church, they had an emergency meeting. They got together, and they decided to keep the houses.
Sometimes it takes generations, because they don't want to change, but then as the generations change within the church, and the more informed and more information you get, and a lot of it's the trust factor.
It's fascinating working with a big group.
What church was it?
Tabernacle Church at Grove. And so it wasn't even the church. They owned 2 row houses on their property. and they were going to tear those row houses down. So they pulled them out and put them into service as rentals. Go ahead.
I don't know if you want to address this at this point or not. But
Shoot.
say you do the tax credit project, what are the ramifications for future owners?
There are none.
Really?
There are none.
If you are doing state credits, as soon as you get your Part 3 approved, you can sell it, sell the house, and there's no restrictions on what the new property owner can do with that. And I've had projects where the day after they got their Part 3 approved, they sold the house, and that's okay. But
some developers use it as that just for that tool.
Right, but if you keep the house and you've gotten tax credits on it, then for state credits at least, if you, like, I had one project where the day after he got his Part 3, he was keeping it was a duplex, and he changed the doors. It was a colonial revival house, and he put a Victorian front door on it, and it was in the fan, and one of the tax credit reviewer who reviewed the project lived in the fan, and she walked by and saw that they changed the door. And she called me up and says, if he doesn't put that other door back on, we're yanking his credits. So if you keep the building, you have to keep it up for at least, if it's state only, for at least 3 years. If it's federal, it's 5 years. Any changes you make in that time have to be approved. But if you, for state, you can immediately sell the building, and it puts no restrictions on the new owners.
It's a great question.
Yeah.
I think that for homeowners or people that don't work in the construction industry that want to approach a project like this, part of understanding the project is organizing the project. And we do that with divisions. Everybody codes everything these days. And so one of the things that you need to do if you're a builder or if you're a homeowner and you're doing one of these projects is you need to represent the money that you spent to the Department of Historic Resources. And if you're doing federal and you're going to keep it as an income producing property, then you need to present it to the National Park Service. So you want to organize your qualified expenses and your non-qualified expenses. And so we use divisions of construction. I won't read you through all these, and some of them are silly because this is my actual list from my company. And one of the things I tell my guys is, if you're having a bad day, you can go get ice cream. So 1245 is about ice cream. But you can look at all of these things, and it should pretty much take you through your whole project. So there's a cost line item for everything that we think is important in the project. And I boiled this down. There are so many construction divisions. I mean, it's thousands. So that's why these are numbered in the thousands, because they start at 0001 and then go through 16 or 17,000. But these are the primary codes that we use at our company. And the Department of Historic Resources has a form that they've developed. And at the end of your project, you're going to represent how you spent your money in this form that they've developed for everybody to use. So everybody has the same form, which is brilliant. That's the way it should be. So you're going to plug your expenses into these line items, and then you're going to tell them that you did your project based on these dates, whatever those dates may be. And like Ashley said, it's about when you meet your substantial rehabilitation test. It can be longer than 2 years, but your in-service date and when you meet the substantial rehabilitation test are important factors. But you plug all the numbers in, and at the end, it tells you what your total costs are, and it tells you what your rehabilitation, how much credit you're going to get. This doesn't have it calculated, but it would be for the state. It's going to be 25% of your eligible expenses, which really, like Ashley said, is almost, I like to tell people it's almost everything inside your footprint, your original footprint, outside of your appliances, your blinds.
The blinds
They don't qualify. Yeah, I mean, but for the most part, if it's considered part of your construction project and it's a hard cost, it's going to qualify.
What if it turns out to be more than what it's
But if it turns out to be more, then you earn more credits, but you have to. So what I tell all my clients is, this is your budget. You know, if we've worked up a budget for you, it's just an estimate. It's going to change. I think that if you're a conservative person and you're not going to change things much, you're going to add 10% to your project. Historically, on my projects, my clients add 20% typically. And the last time I renovated a personal home, I added 100% to my budget. So
They got excited.
it was me. I got really excited, and it was a lot of fun. I did everything I wanted to do to that house and did not leave any stones unturned. And it was a legitimate 100% more than I thought I was going to spend on the front end.
Ask this question also, because I know we have homes that people buy. What about the rental properties with the tenants that come in? What, how does that handle if it's a historic piece that you please?
That's mostly what we do, is we restore multifamily duplexes, triplexes, 6-unit buildings, 12-unit buildings. We tend to stop at 12-unit buildings, but it's just like any other project. You're just going to do the scope of work that you have in mind, and then you put it in service. And
it's up to the landlord, because with the beautiful work and you have renters.
So I love my renters. They're amazing. They're the easiest part of my job. Fixing a historic building is a big undertaking, and to do it right is important. But if you put the right controls in place, you're going to get really good tenants who appreciate what you've done. And I think that if you explain your lease to them, you tell them how to protect the hardwood floors and tell them the things that they need to know about living in your space, it works out really well. So that's, for me in my career, dealing with renters in those spaces is the easiest part of the equation. I think that's the end of things I have on here. It is. So if y'all have any other questions about the actual mechanics of a project, or any specific questions about construction, fire away. Go ahead.
So do you know for houses that do qualify, would foundation work be a part of
Absolutely.
it? But there's also a problem, as was mentioned before, with roofers. For example, we actually have a roofer who understands metal roofs and is good, but he doesn't advertise. But for foundations, it is really scary out there for homeowners, because they'll say all sorts of stuff, and it's not true. They're not competent. You can end up with a lot of damage to your building. And so what do homeowners do to even find competent, because looking at reviews doesn't really work anymore?
Yeah.
It's hard.
It is hard. It's difficult. This actually was talked about with masons. And masonry is one of those things where at the beginning of a project, we know that when we approach a project, if we're going to have to do masonry work, we're going to take a sample of that mortar and we're going to send it off to, I think the place is in Connecticut. I'm not sure my project managers do this, and I've been so far away from doing that part of it for the last 15 years, but we just do it automatically. They send it off, they match it, and then they send us back lime mortar that matches our mortar. So we know that anything we do, okay, we've got the right mortar. We're going to put it up and test it in a test space that's not visible from the street to make sure it does in fact match before we put it anywhere else in the building. But we're still going to use it sparingly during a tax credit project, because masonry is something that's very serious on the exterior of your building, and if you botch it, you're not getting your tax credits. And it's a very serious part.
Let me just add, and I'll step up here.
Jump on
have
it.
to leave. If you have to do repointing, you do test patches first, and you send in photographs to the reviewers and make sure they sign off on the test patch before you do it all. That way, you know, you have a better idea that you're going to get approved at the end of the day. But be sure and do a test patch on masonry before you do a lot of the repointing. And do as little as possible.
As little as possible.
Yes, as little as possible.
But anything you have a question about, if you send the reviewers a question, getting an amendment answered is a great idea.
Yeah.
There's nothing better than asking for permission to do something and being told no and then not doing it. Because if you have to undo it, it's expensive. You paid to do it, now you've got to pay to undo it. And you've got to do it without compromising the integrity of the fabric, whatever that material is. So it's a great point.
I wish that DHR had a way of certifying workmen.
They have a
Skilled-
list on their website, but they do not certify them, they do not make any
Claim.
judgment about how good they are. But it is a list.
It's tough.
Yeah, it is tough to find good workmen
Yeah.
for particular things, like roofers, particularly metal roofers,
Yeah.
masons.
You just have to go by word of mouth, I
Yeah.
guess.
I actually have my guys perform the majority of our masonry for that reason. And I try to avoid it. And I have no problem saying this. In the first 5 years, we will, if we can avoid doing anything during the tax credit period and the first 5 years of ownership, we will kick it down the road. And we will do it once we're through that tax credit period, because we don't want to throw off the apple cart. We want to make sure everything is okay.
But she's right about getting estimates from various roofers. They'll tell you to they say, oh, you want a metal roof? And they put a McDonald's metal roof, you know, with the big ridge at the top.
Yeah, a Conar, coated metal roof is a lot different than a hand-turned metal roof.
It is not the same.
In
It
fact,
doesn't
we
look
do.
the same.
You saw the roof that we put on that porch that was copper. That's a flat lock metal roof, and every seam gets soldered.
Oh, wow.
And that's something that's indicative to a front porch in that neighborhood, so we know we need to put that back. A standing seam copper roof would be less expensive because the installation is a lot faster. But
And there
a
are a lot of
Conar,
skilled people out there.
right? But I don't even know if a snap lock metal roof would qualify.
That's the McDonald's style roof.
Yeah.
DHR and NPS have gotten a lot looser about new metal roofs, but the width of the pan between the seams
Yeah.
has to match the historic roof, and the height of the seams has to match the historic roof.
It's usually that ridge
Yeah.
that has that big piece. That's the commercial piece
Right.
that
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
stands out. It's what's coming down the
That-
outside
Right.
hips.
The other thing I forgot to say, one of the don'ts is if you're replacing bathroom floors, do not use a tile in a wood pattern. They do not want you to try to replicate a wood floor with a piece of tile.
We actually keep our wood floors in our bathrooms
Right.
with renters. So we have renters that are using bathrooms with old heart pine flooring. But I know that heart pine is in great shape,
Right.
and it's going to hold up really well to the moisture. Will it do as well as tile? No, it's not a ceramic. But we know that room had wood floor in it, and our goal is to keep as much of that historic fabric, as much of that plaster, as much of that hardwood, as much of the hardware, as much of the doors, as much of the casing, all those things. We want to keep as much in place as possible.
Yeah, I had one project where in every bathroom, it was a multi-building, they had multi-buildings, houses that were multi-family. And in every one of the bathrooms, they had put in a tile floor that looked like wood, and they had to take every one of them out and replace them with a tile that did not look like wood. So that's gotten to be a big thing all of a sudden.
Do you paint the bathroom wood floors, or do you?
We cover them in polyurethane. We don't paint them. No, we sand them.
Not shiny,
We sand them and refinish them, and they look gorgeous.
yeah.
Yeah, I can pull up a picture if you want to see a picture.
What about the stuff that you can see, like insulation?
That's a great question. Insulation, we prefer to do batt insulation because it's encapsulated and it's not going to make a mess, and we can easily remove it. We don't use foam because that would stick, and as far as we know, we're not supposed to do that. So we'll often build up our framing in the attics to achieve our R values. And sometimes we'll put new sheathing and insulation on the rooftop to also achieve are our values. But we're never spray foaming, and we're not doing blown-in insulation. That stuff is a mess. You should just avoid it if you can. It is a terrible mess. See how fast I can get this. It's a great question. I really like the way hardwood floors look in bathrooms, so I think it's worthwhile to look at one.
And we left our hardwood floor in our kitchen. And it was, I guess it was hard pine, I don't know.
Oh yeah, hard pine's gorgeous.
A lot of the buildings in Richmond, and Richmond has a lot more resources to research your building than Hanover County does, unfortunately. Because Richmond building permits go back for a long ways, and their real estate cards in like the 60s, and apparently Henrico did the same thing. They went around and took pictures of every building, and usually those photographs, it's just the front, but usually just the front. But those photographs are attached to the real estate card, and that's a really good resource, which I don't think Hanover does.
Well, they do now, but they don't go back. They used to have assessment cards.
Right.
That every single edition was marked on the accession card, and then they got rid of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a shame they do that. But this is how the hardwood floor looks in a bathroom. It plays really well with the historic fabric.
Oh yeah.
And it looks, it holds up. I'm always surprised at how well it will hold up. All right, I will close this out.
Though, I mean, old houses around here, you'll have in the, that were built before indoor plumbing, they put a bathroom in the 20s, 30s, and then you see the asbestos tiles, and you don't even know what's underneath it. Like, what is under those floors that you don't even want to touch?
That's what asbestos abatement contractors are for. Let them find out. But sometimes there's hardwood.
Oh,
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Asbestos.
You know, lead paint abatement, asbestos abatement, all of that stuff is an eligible expense.
I will sit down unless anybody else has any other questions. Thank you, guys. Yeah.
I want to thank both of you for coming tonight. It's a plethora of information, and I'm sure we could probably go for another 2 hours or more with questions. I know I have many swirling around in my head. But all the more encouragement that I hope that I see familiar faces at the next session or the next few sessions. And again, we're going to try and put these on the website. So if you forgot a piece of information and you want to see them, check out the Town of Ashland's website on the historic page and see if we can add those links on there.
Or you can save your questions, and when the folks from DHR come, ask them.
Also, over on the table, there are some green cards for you. If you have additional questions or topic ideas, we would be happy to open, sessions and continue the sessions even after the ones that we already have scheduled. So, or maybe next spring, do another, spring session where we have multiple people come in and do, enhance on what we've already learned. So feel free to write down your thoughts or your questions, or maybe you have a concern in your house that you want addressed, and maybe we can find someone to help you with that. Certainly, put your information on there, put it in the bucket, and we'll get back to you. Yes?
And I did bring a couple of cost certifications, if you guys want to see it, how they're actually organized in these books, where you can see all the receipts and all the expenses for a couple of projects and see how they're compiled.
Oh, can we?
Yeah, they're just sitting right there, happy to walk you through them and show you.
So, and then the other question I had for you too, are you open to, if anybody wants your email, that they can reach out to you if they have additional questions and whatnot. So, thank you all for coming.
Thanks very much.